So you've heard some great things about the BMW M2 and thought to yourself, why not get a little taste of the hype? Well, not so fast, because the M235i Gran Coupe, well, it's not exactly a coupe. It's also not exactly a sedan because it shares a platform with the BMW X2, which is a crossover, and I think you see where I'm going with this. The four-door tour trades rear-wheel drive for a front-wheel drive biased all-wheel drive system similar to the holodeck system found in the Audi S3s. Hard acceleration can even induce jumpy front-wheel spin. In this M Performance trim, gone is the turbocharged inline-6, and in its stead is a 2-liter turbo 4-cylinder producing 301 horsepower and 331 pound-feet of torque. As expected, the engine is mated to an 8-speed ZF transmission, and the car sprints to 60 in about 4.6 seconds. The engine bay is the shallowest I've ever seen in a BMW, and the engine is actually mounted in front of the front axle. That's front-wheel drive bias for you. The car looks relatively sporty, but also kind of awkward. The rear overhang is short and abrupt. It has a slightly shallow trunk opening as well. The headlights are mostly good, but the taillights are a bit excessively wide. All the vents up front are real, but BMW couldn't help but throw a pair of fake ones out rear. Speaking of fake, the active sound design that's pumped into the car via the speakers is very, very obnoxious. Visibility is only so-so, and rear seat, legroom, and headroom are not good. Overall, the interior fit and finish is good, and while some of the plastics do feel a cut below the 3 and 4 series, the main touch points are solid, and the live Cockpit Pro and iDrive 7 systems are impressive and well executed. Alright, now we're driving the M235i Gran Coupe, and I'm in sport mode, which is this car's most intense, highest setting. Transmission is in normal D right now. I might pop it into manual mode periodically, but we're just cruising along. So obviously this car is BMW's attempt or jab at the Audi S3. This is an inference I've made based on the size, the price point, the power output, and the general market placement within the line, and especially considering the new M Performance branding is directly kind of aimed at Audi's S. And obviously, no, this is not a real M car, but it does have an M badge out back, so it's supposed to be worthy of some spirited driving and be somewhat performance-oriented, right? I feel like it's important to establish why the Audi S3 was so successful when it came out around 2013. Well, it combined a relatively torquey motor with an all-wheel drive system, and that propelled it to 60 miles an hour at a faster pace than its big brother, the Audi S4, at least at the time. And this is a time where the E92 M3 was just finishing production and Audi was still producing the B8.5 RS5. Those are both V8 cars, low on torque, and for the more popular of the two, the M3, with rear-wheel drive and a very, very hard time putting power down off the line, relatively speaking. I know some will say no, it's not, but those cars didn't hook up off the line every single time consistently, and a car like the S3 comes out quite a bit less expensive, and it's like a little pocket rocket. You put your foot down off the line, and every time you're going to get about a high 4.0 to 60, easy to use launch control, dual clutch transmission. So, it really paved the way for now the A35 in this car. So where does that leave the M235i today? Unfortunately, the markets have greatly changed, and cars like the new M3 and M4 are coming out with torque monster worthy motors and even an optional all-wheel drive system that I'm personally not a fan of, but of course and undoubtedly helps put the power down. So then the price point is really where this car wins, right? It's an M Performance model, so it slots in between a base 230i Gran Coupe and let's supposedly say a fully fledged M2 competition. Unfortunately though, the average selling price of these M235i's is only about $9,000 or $10,000 shy of a fully fledged legitimate M2 competition. Now that's a good chunk of change, but it's food for thought, right? That maybe you're not too far away from a significantly better driving experience. Suffice to say, the M2 is arguably the best M car of the last 10 years, 8-9 years, and this isn't even a real M car. But it does have a part of the M2's winning formula, and that's the size. It's a bit smaller, more tossable, more nimble than its big brother, the M340i. And the 3 Series in general, while being rear-wheel drive, and at least rear-wheel drive based, and a bit more dynamically capable, isn't, I mean, it's just growing in size, and it's damn near the size of an E39 M5 now. So it is nice to get inside of one of these and be like, matter of fact, it's probably the size of an E60 M5. It's just nice to get into one of these and feel like you're in a nice small little car, especially here in the States where people want SUVs. This really stands out as one of the smaller cars you can get, especially in a 4-door form with a trunk. Now, despite some of this car's crossover roots, I was a bit disappointed in the tall boy test. And if you guys want to comment down below and make a guess and see if you guys are right, but we're going to jump into the tall boy test and see how this car does. So without further ado, here it is. We're gonna rip it a little bit. What I like is that it gives me the gear I want always, as you'd expect from a BMW tuned ZF transmission. And that's really a strong suit in this car. It really helps that 4-banger and this chassis conjoin perfectly. All right, we're taking off here in sport transmission mode and in sport mode. I mean, there's definitely a discernible turbo lag, something that I've kind of come to forget with my own personal car, which is a F3340. So with the B58 motor, the same motor you can now find in the current M340i and the Supra, et cetera, and the turbo lag isn't a bad thing. Occasionally it gives you this kind of kick that pushes you back into your seats and for a moment makes this car feel faster than it is. Unfortunately, staring down at the live Cockpit Pro and seeing the speed not increasing as rapidly as you think, it's a bit of a letdown, but the car does feel quick, and that turbo lag, I mean, to be expected of a high boost 4-banger, can be sometimes nice. Unfortunately, the steering is a bit vague, just like most BMWs, and this particularly is bad because of its front-wheel drive biased system. It's kind of what you'd expect, I guess. It's just so dissimilar to the rest of the BMW lineup, at least up until this point, and so dissimilar from how balanced the otherwise current 2 Series or M2 competition has been. On the bright side, the seats are pretty supportive. They're a bit snugger than those that you find on the 3 Series, but they're supportive. The seating position is pretty good. It's a tiny bit higher than I'd like, but again, I always want a very low seating position, and I'm relatively on the taller end of the spectrum. The brake feel is really, really good. That's a really big standout feature on this car. I think almost better than that on the M340i. Definitely better than that on my F30 340i. I know some people find the brake feel on all the new G-body BMWs to be, G-Series BMWs to be abrasive and hard to feather, but I think just the overall more solid bite is pleasant and a more welcome addition versus a dull feeling brake pedal. The calipers themselves are also quite large, and I mean, the car's nimble here, it just understeers so much. It's a shame because otherwise the car itself is relatively light and the short wheelbase makes it quite nimble, but it's just that front-wheel drive bias system is so anti-BMW. And as much as I don't mind the tech of last generation BMWs, particularly cars from around 2016, 2017 and forward, maybe even 2018 and forward. So I guess it was a short window between 2018 and 2019, 2020, but this car does get the live Cockpit Pro, obviously, and that iDrive 7 system that you can talk to. It's a step forward. I can't also deny that this little cockpit area isn't nicer than likely what you get in an M2 competition or the otherwise 2 Series coupe, the F37, F87, I believe. It's just that it doesn't matter that much to me. You still have the funky reverse tack, and I'll take basic gauges as you find in an M2 over this if it means a better driving experience. This just seems like some icing on an otherwise not so tasty cake. So since this car is aimed directly at the Audi S3, it shouldn't come as a surprise that the driving dynamics feel more similar to that of an Audi than that of a BMW. And I'd rather have an Audi as an Audi than a BMW. So things get a bit more complicated when you're comparing this car within the actual BMW lineup. And for the sake of both price and 4 cylinders, I'm going to compare it to the 330i, in which case I would probably swing for a 330i with the M Sport pack and maybe just throw a basic ECU tune on it, basic flash, and appreciate the more dynamic setup as well as just it being rear-wheel drive. The chassis setup is better. But I can't deny the value of this car as a package right out of the box for someone who just wants a bit more of a fun car at a reasonable price point, as opposed to the 330. The fact that you get a nicer set of brakes, slightly stiffer suspension, the overall smaller size, and this motor kind of geeked up straight out of the factory. Truly, I would probably either just spend a bit more and jump into an M340i or an M2 if I'm buying, ideally, M2 competition, or I'd save some bucks and get into a Mini Cooper John Cooper Works. This segment just doesn't make as much sense as it once did. If you enjoyed the video, consider subscribing. I'm releasing new videos, it seems like every Friday now, so every week. Tune back in for more. As always, this is Rio. Peace.